The sky over the kingdom was dark and restless, streaked with bruised clouds that promised a storm. In the heart of the village, the people moved with quiet tension, their voices low as if speaking too loudly could summon disaster. The time of the mating ceremony was near, a tradition as old as the fjords themselves, a rite that bound the strongest warriors to maidens chosen by fate and custom. In a small hidden house on the edge of the village, a young maiden named Ailyn sat quietly by the window. Her eyes, clear as a spring, watched the villagers hurry past, carrying baskets and tools, their faces drawn tight with worry. She had heard the whispers. The ceremony begins at dawn. The chosen ones will not resist the king's will. Haldor will decide who is worthy. Each word made her heart thrum with unease. Ailyn was no ordinary maiden. She was clever, brave, and had a strength of spirit that belied her small frame. But she lived in the shadow of her stepmother, Sigrid, a woman consumed by fear and envy. Sigrid had hidden Ailyn from the ceremony, convinced that no warrior could be trusted with her stepdaughter's life. Day after day she led Ailyn into secret paths, locked her in hidden rooms, and whispered charms to keep the world's dangers at bay. "Ailyn," Sigrid said one evening, her voice low and urgent, "tomorrow they will come for the maidens. You must stay hidden. You cannot leave this place, not for anything." Ailyn nodded, her chest tight. She wanted freedom, wanted to see the world beyond her stepmother's walls, wanted to feel the wind and sun on her face without fear. Yet she remained silent, knowing that disobedience could bring more than punishment. It could bring death. The night before the ceremony, Ailyn lay on the straw bed in the hidden chamber beneath the roots of an ancient oak. Outside, the wind moaned through the forest, carrying the scent of rain and distant fire. Shadows danced across the walls, cast by the flickering light of a single candle. She listened to the whispers of the forest, feeling the pulse of something older, something alive. Far above, on a cliff overlooking the valley, a figure stood against the storm. Haldor, the giant Viking, known across lands and seas for his immense strength and unmatched skill in battle, looked down at the village with a sharp eye. Even the wind seemed to bend around him, the world trembling at his presence. Villagers had always feared him, spoke of him in hushed tones. But tonight, he did not come as a warrior to conquer. He came seeking something or someone that only destiny could reveal. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the village stirred. Families gathered, maidens dressed in ceremonial robes, their faces pale with anticipation and dread. Ailyn's heart ached to see them, to wish she could walk among them, but she stayed hidden, behind the roots, behind charms, behind fear. Her stepmother had done everything to protect her, and yet a part of Ailyn longed for something beyond hiding, something alive, fierce, and unclaimed by tradition. The ceremony began. Drums thundered in the village square, horns blew, and the air grew thick with the scent of burning pine and oil. One by one, the maidens were led forward, their hands trembling, eyes downcast. The warriors waited, their armor glinting in the morning sun, each one hoping for the favor of fate. But Ailyn did not appear. She watched from her hidden place as the others were presented, as the king's enforcer, a sorcerer with dark eyes and a cruel mouth, passed judgment. Whispers of discontent rippled through the crowd. Some villagers wondered why one maiden had disappeared, why she had not answered the call of tradition. Some blamed the stepmother, some prayed for Ailyn's safety, and some feared the wrath that might fall upon them all. Then, in the distance, a shadow moved against the cliffs. Haldor had arrived. His presence silenced the drums, hushed the voices, and made the earth itself seem to pause. The villagers looked up, awe and fear mingling in their eyes. No man or warrior could match him in size, strength, or presence. Yet it was not strength alone that drew attention. It was the weight of destiny he carried, the sense that the world had shifted, that some balance had changed. Ellen, hidden beneath the roots of her oak, felt a strange pull in her chest. Something stirred inside her, a spark of hope, a flash of courage. She did not know why, but she sensed that Haldor was not here to enforce the ceremony as it had always been done. He was here for her. Sigrid, her stepmother, tightened the charms around the hidden chamber. "No one can find you here," she whispered, her hands trembling. But even she felt the change in the air, the pull of something impossible. Shadows moved differently. The wind carried an unfamiliar sound, deep and resonant, like the voice of the earth itself. Suddenly, the roots of the oak shivered. A rumble passed through the ground, soft at first, then growing stronger. Aelin clutched the bedpost, heart hammering. Outside, a figure appeared at the edge of the glade, massive, larger than any man she had ever seen. Haldor. His eyes, sharp and searching, scanned the forest, pausing at the hiding place that even charms had struggled to protect. Aelin gasped, instinctively pressing herself deeper into the shadows. Her stepmother's face was pale, fear and fury mingled in her eyes. She had done everything to protect the maiden, and yet the laws of fate seemed stronger than any magic she knew. Haldor stepped forward, the forest seeming to bend around him, the trees parting as if in recognition. His gaze fell upon Aelin, and for a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The wind stilled, the drums in the village faded, and all that remained was the giant Viking and the hidden maiden. "Aelin," he said, his voice deep, resonant, filled with the weight of mountains and storms. "Why do you hide?" Aelin's mouth opened and then closed again. She could not speak, not fully, for fear and awe tangled with the words. Sigrid stepped forward, attempting to intervene, but Haldor's eyes, glowing with a strange understanding, met hers. He did not speak a word of anger or command. Instead, he acknowledged the truth that even magic could not hide. "You cannot keep her from destiny," he said softly, almost to himself. Aelin felt a strange warmth rise within her. She did not fully understand what was happening, but she knew her life had shifted in a single heartbeat. The world beyond her hiding place called to her, dangerous and beautiful, and this giant Viking, this impossible man, was the key she had never expected. As Haldor reached the edge of the glade, the wind whipped around him, carrying with it the scent of salt, pine, and something older, something ancient. Aelin's pulse raced. She realized that hiding had kept her safe, but it had also kept her from life, from destiny, from the fire that now stirred in her chest. The villagers, watching from afar, murmured in shock and fear. A giant Viking choosing a maiden who was hidden, unseen, untouched by tradition, this was unheard of. Whispers spread like wildfire, blending awe, fear, and hope into a strange melody of anticipation. Aelin clutched the roots of the oak, heart pounding, knowing that her life was about to change forever. Her stepmother's charms, the safety of secrecy, the rules of the ceremony, all of it seemed fragile against the force of what had just arrived. Haldor took a final step into the clearing, eyes never leaving Aelin. "Come," he said simply. His hand, large and warm, extended toward her, not with threat, but with promise. Aelin's breath caught. She glanced at her stepmother, whose face was a mask of fear and despair. But deep inside, she felt something she had never known before: courage, longing, and the first true taste of freedom. The storm above rumbled, as if the sky itself recognized the moment. And as the first raindrops fell, glinting like silver in the early light, Aelin made her choice. She stepped from her hiding place, and destiny, at last, claimed her. The storm raged over the village, tearing through the roofs and whipping the fjords into white froth. But in the hidden glade, a strange calm had settled. Halldor stood tall, his massive frame like a mountain against the wind, his eyes still locked on Ellen, who had just stepped from her hiding place. The rain plastered her hair to her face, but she held her head high, a mix of fear and courage in her gaze. Sigrid, her stepmother, stood frozen, her hands trembling. She had tried to protect Aileen from the world, from the ceremony, from warriors, but fate had arrived in the form of a giant Viking who did not follow the rules. She wanted to shout, to pull Ellen back, to call off this impossible choice, but her voice caught in her throat. Halldor's presence was too commanding, too undeniable. "You do not belong hidden," Halldor said again, his voice steady, a strange comfort against the roar of the storm. "The world waits for you." "I wait for you." Ellen swallowed hard. She wanted to trust him. But the world outside the glade had always been dangerous. Yet something in Halldor's gaze stirred a feeling she had never known, a sense that for the first time she might not be alone in facing the dangers that awaited. The stepmother moved forward, her face pale and tense. "He is a giant, a warrior from the north. He will destroy everything if you let him take you," she said, her voice trembling. "Stay hidden, Elin. I beg you." Elin shook her head, her heart pounding. "I cannot hide any more," she said. Her voice, small yet firm, carried through the glade. "I will face what comes. I will not live in fear forever." Halldor nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Then come with me," he said, extending his large hand. "I will protect you." For a moment, the storm seemed to pause. The wind stilled as if the forest itself held its breath. Then, with a quiet courage, Aelin stepped forward and placed her hand in Halldor's. His grip was strong but careful, not crushing, a reassurance that he would not harm her. They moved through the glade, the trees bending away from Halldor's path. The air was thick with rain, the scent of pine and wet earth filling Aelin's senses. She felt the power in him, raw and undeniable, but also a strange gentleness. He was a warrior, yes, but not cruel. Not to her. But the calm did not last. From the edge of the village, a dark shadow emerged. The king's enforcer, a sorcerer of great power, had arrived. His eyes burned like coals, his robes flowing in the wind, and in his hand he carried a staff carved with runes that glowed faintly with dark energy. He had watched Halldor and Aelin vanish into the forest and had followed, determined that no maiden would escape the king's law. "You dare defy the rights!" the sorcerer called, his voice slicing through the storm like a blade. "The ceremony is not for you to choose. Every maiden answers the call of destiny." Halldor turned slowly, his massive form casting a shadow over the forest floor. "Destiny is not given," he said, his voice like thunder. "It is claimed, and she has claimed it herself." Aelin's breath caught. She had never heard such defiance spoken aloud. Something inside her stirred, a spark of hope and courage she had never felt while hiding in shadows. Halldor's presence gave her strength. She realized that she could face this threat, not as a frightened girl, but as someone who had chosen her own path. The sorcerer's eyes narrowed. He raised his staff, and the air shimmered with dark magic. The trees shivered, the ground quaking slightly beneath their roots. "You cannot escape the king's will," the sorcerer hissed. "No force in the land can save you." Halldor shifted, placing himself between the sorcerer and Elin. "You underestimate the power of choice," he said. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but even before he drew it, the forest seemed to bend around him. The wind shifted, the rain softened, and the whispers of the trees carried warnings to the sorcerer's ears. Elin, standing beside Halldor, felt a strange courage flow through her. She looked at the sorcerer and spoke, her voice steady despite the fear thrumming in her chest. I choose my life. I choose freedom. I choose the path I will walk. And I will not be bound by fear or law that seeks to control me. The sorcerer's face twisted with anger. He stepped forward, summoning shadows that writhed and reached toward Elin like living creatures. But Haldor moved with the speed of a mountain storm, swinging his massive sword in a wide arc. The shadows were torn apart before they could reach her. Elin's heart raced, but it was not just fear, it was exhilaration. She had never known the world could feel so alive, so dangerous, so full of possibility. Haldor's presence was terrifying and comforting all at once. She realized, in a way she had never imagined, that strength did not always belong to the loudest or the cruelest. True strength could protect, could inspire, could lift a frightened girl from hiding into the light of her own courage. The sorcerer snarled and unleashed another wave of magic, but the forest itself seemed to rise in defense. The trees bent, roots twisted, and the rain fell harder, blinding him. Haldor moved like the wind through the storm, his sword and body a living shield for Elin. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sorcerer's curses could not reach them. Haldor carried her across rivers swollen with rain, past cliffs that jutted like jagged teeth, and through thick woods where only someone of his size and strength could follow. Every step, Elin felt more alive, more certain that she had made the right choice in leaving her hiding place. Finally, they reached a fortress carved into the cliffs, a place that seemed as old as the mountains themselves. Haldor opened a heavy wooden door and ushered Elin inside. The stone walls glowed faintly with firelight, and the warmth of the hearth contrasted with the storm raging outside. You are safe here, Haldor said, lowering her gently to the floor. For now. Elin looked around, her eyes wide with wonder. The fortress was unlike anything she had seen, strong, ancient, and filled with a quiet power. She realized that Haldor's strength was not just in his body, but in the life he had carved for himself here, away from the rules of kings and sorcerers. But safety was only temporary. Through the open window, the storm still raged, and the faint glow of dark magic lingered in the forest. Elin knew the sorcerer would not give up easily. The king's will was powerful, and the ceremony's rules were older than memory. Yet for the first time, she did not feel powerless. Haldor watched her carefully, as if sensing her thoughts. The world is not kind to those who choose differently, he said softly. But it is kinder than hiding forever. And you are no longer hiding. Elin nodded, feeling a strange sense of pride. She had been hidden, protected, and constrained all her life. Now she stood at the edge of danger and freedom, and for the first time she understood that courage was a choice, not an accident. Hours passed, and the storm outside began to soften. The rain pattered gently against the stone walls, and the wind whispered through the fortress. Elin sat by the fire, feeling warmth seep into her bones, and thought of the ceremony, the sorcerer, and the village she had left behind. She realized she would not go back, not now, not ever. Yet even in this moment of safety, a sense of tension lingered. The king's enforcer would not rest. The ancient rules of the mating ceremony would not be ignored. And deep in her heart, Elin knew that the true trial had only just begun. As night fell, the forest outside glimmered with strange, faint lights, glowing eyes of creatures she could not name, shadows that seemed to move with a will of their own. Haldor stood at the window, looking out, his massive frame still, listening to the whispers of the woods. Elin, he said, turning to her, the path we walk is not easy. But together, we are stronger than any law, any magic, any shadow that would try to stop us. Elin nodded, feeling a bond form between them that went beyond words. She trusted him, not because she had to, but because she had chosen to. And she realized that this trust, fragile and new, was the first step in shaping her own destiny. The fire crackled, the storm softened to a distant murmur, and the fortress stood like a sentinel against the night. Outside, the sorcerer's rage burned in the darkness, his shadow moving closer, seeking the girl who dared to defy fate. And in that moment, Ellen understood something she had never known while hidden. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to face it, to step into the storm, and to walk beside the one who would fight by your side, no matter what came next. The forest around the fortress was alive with shadows and whispers. Even in the soft glow of the hearth inside, Elin could feel the presence of eyes watching from beyond the walls, creatures born of magic and darkness that prowled the woods. The storm had passed, but the tension lingered. A reminder that the king's will and the sorcerer's wrath were still reaching for her. Haldor moved silently through the fortress, his massive form casting long shadows in the flickering firelight. Elin followed, feeling the solid strength in every step he took. There was a rhythm to his movement, a confidence that made the walls themselves seem safer. But it was not just his strength that impressed her. It was his patience, the way he watched over her without smothering, guiding her without commanding. "You must be ready," Haldor said softly, his deep voice carrying through the stone corridors. "The sorcerer will not wait long. He will test us. He will send creatures and shadows to break our resolve. You must learn to trust not only me, but yourself." Elin nodded, gripping the edge of the wooden railing. She had spent her life hidden, protected by fear and magic. And now she was learning a new kind of courage, the courage to face what she did not yet understand. She realized that she could not rely on hiding or her stepmother's charms anymore. She had to grow stronger. The first test came at dusk. A low growl rolled through the forest, echoing against the cliffs. Glowing eyes appeared between the trees, moving with unnatural speed. From the shadows emerged creatures that seemed born of smoke and flame, wolves with silver teeth and black fur that glimmered with a spectral light. They circled the fortress, their eyes locked on Ellen, sensing her fear and curiosity alike. Haldor's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "Do not be afraid," he said. "They will test you, but they cannot harm what is chosen." Ellen's heart pounded as the creatures came closer. Her first instinct was to retreat, to run back into the safety of the fortress, but Haldor stood beside her, calm and unshaken. "Feel the forest," he instructed. "Do not run from it. Let it guide you. They are part of this world as much as you are. Respect them, and they will not harm you." She took a deep breath, letting the damp forest air fill her lungs. Slowly, she extended her hand toward one of the wolves, and to her surprise, it paused. Its eyes, glowing like molten silver, studied her carefully. The wolf's stance softened, and the rest followed suit, forming a cautious circle around her. Haldor smiled faintly. "Good. You are learning. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the choice to stand firm despite it." Elin felt a thrill of pride, but the sense of danger did not leave her. She knew the sorcerer was watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. Every shadow in the forest seemed to move with purpose, carrying whispers that chilled the air. That night, as the fortress slept under the watchful eyes of Haldor and the forest creatures, Elin could not rest. She wandered to the top of the cliff, where the wind tore through her hair, carrying the scent of pine and salt from the fjords below. Haldor followed silently, standing a step behind her, a guardian more than a companion. "You are not afraid?" Elin asked softly, though she could feel the tremor in her own voice. "I am always cautious," Haldor replied, his eyes scanning the dark horizon. "But fear does not control me. It will not control you either, if you trust yourself." Ellen turned to look at him. There was something almost mythic in his presence. The way he seemed to belong to the wild and the wind, to the mountains and the storm. And yet he was patient, gentle, and protective in a way she had never imagined possible. She realized she was beginning to rely on him not just for safety, but for strength of heart. As they stood together, the wind carrying whispers from the forest below, a faint glow appeared in the distance. The sorcerer had arrived, and with him came a new kind of danger. Not just creatures, but a force older and darker than Aelin had faced. A shadow that twisted the forest itself, bending trees and roots into shapes that seemed alive, shapes that moved with intention. Haldor stepped forward, his sword gleaming faintly in the twilight. "Stay close," he instructed. "This is no ordinary threat. He will try to divide us, to break our trust. Stand firm." "Do not falter." Aelin nodded, gripping his arm. Fear was there, but it was tempered by the courage that had grown inside her. She felt the forest pulse beneath her feet, felt the creatures that had circled her now murmuring in silent support. She was no longer hidden, no longer protected by magic alone. She was part of this world, and she would face it with Haldor. The sorcerer's shadow moved closer, his magic coiling through the forest like smoke. He whispered words that made the trees shiver and the earth tremble. Shapes twisted from the shadows, forming hands and faces that reached for Aelin. But Haldor moved like a storm, cutting through the shapes with his sword, each swing precise, controlled, and protective. Aelin realized then that courage was not only in facing the external threats, it was in facing herself, her doubts, her fears, and her uncertainty. Every step she took beside Haldor, every moment she chose to stand firm, strengthened her. She was not merely a maiden being protected. She was a part of this defense, part of the power that kept the darkness at bay. Hours passed. The night deepened, and the sorcerer's attacks became more desperate. Yet each time, Aelin and Haldor moved as one, her courage fueling him, his strength anchoring her. They began to understand a rhythm, a balance of power and trust that made them stronger than either could be alone. Finally, the forest fell silent. The creatures retreated, the twisted shadows dissolved into mist, and the sorcerer's presence faded, leaving only the echo of his threats. Haldor lowered his sword, turning to Aelin. "You did well," he said quietly. "You faced more than fear tonight. You faced yourself. That is the first step toward true strength." Aelin's chest heaved. She had never felt such exhaustion and exhilaration at the same time. Her hands shook, but it was not only from fear. It was from the power she felt awakening within her, the knowledge that she could stand, fight, and choose. As the first light of dawn broke across the fjords, Aelin looked out from the cliff once more. The village lay quiet in the distance, unaware of the trials that had passed in the forest. The ceremony, the king, the sorcerer, all of it seemed smaller somehow, less certain than it had yesterday. Yet even in this calm, a new tension hung in the air. From the deeper forest, a faint glow appeared, a figure unlike any creature she had faced. It moved with grace and purpose, eyes glimmering with a light that seemed both alive and ancient. Haldor noticed it too, his body tensing as he studied the movement. "Aelin," he said, his voice low, "something watches us. Something neither of us has seen before. It is old and powerful. We must be ready for whatever comes next." Aelin swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of fear and curiosity. She had faced shadows, twisted creatures, and the sorcerer's magic. But this was different. She sensed that this figure carried a test not only of strength, but of heart and trust, of courage and choice. And as the wind carried whispers from the glowing figure through the trees, Aelin realized that the trials were far from over. The forest, the sorcerer, the magic of the ceremony, they were all part of a larger story, one she could no longer hide from. She was standing at the edge of destiny, with Haldor beside her, and the world itself waiting to challenge them. Her stepmother's charms, her hiding places, the village's traditions, they had protected her only for so long. Now she understood. True protection came from courage, from choice, from the bond she had with Haldor. Together, they were stronger than any law, any magic, any shadow that sought to claim her. The sun rose higher, breaking through clouds, casting light on the fortress and the forest beyond. Aelin felt warmth and hope stirring inside her. She was no longer hidden. She was no longer afraid. She was learning to trust herself and Haldor, and in that trust, she found a power she had never known. But even in this moment of triumph, the glowing figure watched, silent and patient, waiting for the moment to strike, to test them in ways neither had yet imagined. The forest was still, but the air hummed with power. The glowing figure stepped from the shadows, tall and lithe, eyes shining like molten gold. Its form seemed to shift, neither fully human nor beast, as though it belonged to a world older than memory. The ground beneath it shimmered with faint light, and the forest itself leaned forward, silent and tense, waiting for what would come. Aelin's heart raced. She had faced creatures, storms, and dark magic, but this was different. There was intelligence in its gaze, an awareness that weighed heavier than any sword or spell. She felt fear, but not the kind that made her run. This was the kind that demanded courage, demanded choices, demanded the very strength she had been learning to find. Haldor stepped in front of her, his massive frame a wall of protection, but he did not move aggressively. His eyes studied the figure, and for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his stern face. "We do not know its purpose," he said quietly, speaking to Aelin as much as to the figure. "Stand close. Do not be afraid. Trust yourself, trust me." The figure tilted its head, almost curiously. Then, in a voice that carried like the wind over cliffs, it spoke. "You who defy fate, who stand against law and tradition, who claim your choice over duty, prove that you are worthy. Prove that your bond is stronger than fear, stronger than the world's shadows." Aelin's pulse quickened. She looked at Haldor, feeling the same fear and excitement mirrored in his eyes. Together, they had faced the sorcerer and the forest's creatures, but this was something greater, something that would test their hearts as much as their strength. "What must we do?" Aelin asked, her voice steady despite the pounding of her chest. The figure's eyes glimmered brighter. "The test is of trust, courage, and unity. You must face what is darkest within yourselves. Only together can you survive what comes next." Haldor nodded, his hand brushing lightly against Aelin's. "Whatever comes, we face it together," he said. The words were simple, but they carried a promise, a bond forged in the storms, the battles, and the forest trials. The figure raised its hands, and the air around them thickened. Shadows coalesced into shapes, visions of the past, fears, doubts, and regrets made real. Aelin saw herself as she had been hidden, trembling in the oak's roots. She saw the stepmother's fearful face, the villagers' whispers, and the sorcerer's shadowed magic. She saw the ceremony's drums, the anticipation and terror of maidens she had left behind, and the weight of expectations that had pressed down on her all her life. Haldor faced his own shadows, visions of battles lost, comrades fallen, mistakes made, and the loneliness of being feared and shunned. He had always relied on strength, on his size and skill to survive. But these shadows tested more than muscle. They tested his heart. Elin's hand found his. The warmth of his grip steadied her, and she felt courage flowing from him to her, and her own strength returning to him. "We are together," she said quietly. "We are stronger than this. Fear does not control us. We choose each other, and we choose life." Haldor's deep voice echoed her words. "We stand together. No darkness can break what we have." The shadows surged, twisting into shapes that lunged, voices that hissed doubts, winds that threatened to pull them apart. Yet together, Haldor and Elin moved forward, side by side, their hands linked, hearts aligned. Each step they took dissipated the shadows. Each choice they made in trust and courage weakened the figure's hold over the illusions. The glowing figure watched, its eyes bright and unblinking. Slowly it began to nod, a faint smile touching its shifting features. "You have passed the test," it said. "Your bond is true, forged not by law or fear, but by choice and courage. The darkness cannot claim what you protect in each other." The shadows dissolved, the forest sighed in relief, and the air cleared. The glowing figure stepped closer, its presence still powerful but no longer threatening. "Go," it said. "The path you have chosen is yours to walk. The ceremony, the king, the sorcerer, none can undo what you have claimed. But remember, the world will always test the brave." Haldor lowered his sword, a rare smile appearing on his face. "We will face it together," he said, and his eyes met Elin's with a promise that carried weight deeper than words. Elin exhaled, her chest light with relief. She had faced her fears, the shadows, the power of the forest, and the test of destiny itself. She had chosen her path, and in doing so she had found not only courage, but a bond that could not be broken. As dawn broke over the fjords, painting the cliffs with soft gold light, Haldor and Elin walked to the edge of the fortress. Below, the village lay quiet, the echoes of the ceremony fading with the storm. The sorcerer had not been defeated entirely. He lurked in the distance. His magic diminished but still present. But for now, they were free. Elin looked out over the cliffs, the wind tugging at her hair, and felt a joy she had never known in hiding. The world was vast, dangerous, and uncertain, but it was alive. And for the first time, she felt that she belonged not to fear, not to tradition, but to herself, and to Haldor, who had chosen her not because she was required, but because he saw her courage, her spirit, and her heart. Haldor's massive hand found hers again, and she squeezed it. "We will build a life together," he said, "not bound by law or fear, but by choice, by trust, by love." Elin smiled, the sunlight glinting in her eyes. "And we will face whatever comes," she said, her voice strong, "together." The forest around them seemed to breathe in agreement. The creatures that had circled her in the past days now watched peacefully, the shadows of the sorcerer retreating, the glowing figure fading back into the depths of the woods, a silent guardian of the path they had claimed. Their journey was far from over. The kingdom, the king, and the sorcerer still posed challenges. But now they had something stronger than fear, stronger than magic, stronger than tradition. They had courage, trust, and a bond forged through fire, storm, and shadow. As they descended from the cliffs, Haldor and Elin felt the first true peace they had known. The world still hummed with life and danger, but it no longer felt like a cage. It was a place of possibility, and they would face it side by side, hearts aligned, ready for whatever destiny would send next. Elin glanced at Haldor, her eyes bright with hope and determination. "Do you think we are ready for anything?" she asked. Haldor's deep laugh rumbled through the air, strong and certain. "Nothing in this world is simple," he said, "but together there is nothing we cannot face." And as the sun rose fully, casting light on the fjords and forests, on the village below, and on the fortress carved from stone, Aelin and Halldor walked forward into a new day. The storm had passed, the shadows had fled, and the world was theirs to claim, not through fear, not through law, but through courage, choice, and love. For the first time, the hidden maiden was free, and the giant Viking who had chosen her walked beside her, not as a protector, but as an equal, as a partner, as someone who had claimed her heart, and whose heart she had claimed in return. The forest whispered around them, the mountains echoed their steps, and the fjords glimmered like silver in the morning light. Their story was only beginning, a tale of courage, trust, and love that would be told for generations. And far away, in the shadows of the kingdom, the sorcerer watched, knowing that while he could challenge them, he could never undo the bond that had been forged. A new destiny had been claimed, and it would not be broken. Aelin looked up at Halldor, her heart full. "We are stronger than I ever imagined," she said. Halldor smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. "And we are only beginning," he said, his voice like distant thunder and soft wind combined. Together they stepped forward into the light of their future, into the freedom they had chosen, and into the life they would build together, side by side, unafraid and unbroken.